Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary. You are listening and hopefully watching the Use Case Podcast. Today we have Vidhya on from Magnit. We're going to be learning all about her and the technology. So first of all, Ryan, how you doing?
I am fantastic and excited
He
to
always,
learn. I don't
he,
know I don't know Magnet, so I'm excited to
I am,
learn and
I am too. Actually, this is
first
going to be good
timer
for
here.
me. Ryan always gets upset if I don't ask him how he's doing. So that's kind of a bit. It's
Well,
kind of a bit that
there's
we have.
there's backstory here.
There is backstory there.
There's backstory. He often forgets to even say that I'm here.
It's true.
Yeah,
So, Vidya, would you do us a favor and the audience a favor and introduce yourself and Magnet?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me.
Sure.
Great to meet you both, Ryan and Tin Cup.
yeah.
Made sure I
Notice
mentioned
she
my
said my
yeah,
name
I
see,
first.
like
so I
that.
gave
Said
I
him
like
my
the
name
that.
first.
preference right there.
You s-
Yeah. So Vidhya Srinivasan, I am the Chief Product and Marketing Officer for Magnit. Magnit is a pioneer and a leader in a contingent workforce management industry. And people know, Magnit as like, when you think of contingent, some people call it external workforce. Some people think of temp workforce. You have IC gig workers. So any of it that does not fit the full-time
right.
employee bill, is what Magnet helps Fortune 500 companies around the globe help, structure the program from a strategic standpoint. But all the capabilities and services we provide is actually powered by our technology, which we call the Magnet platform. And we recently, I think it's been 6 weeks, we launched a new version of the platform that's AI powered and outcome driven. And that's what I'm excited to talk to you guys about today.
That's fantastic. So, just so I'm clear and the audience is clear, you do both the services side, delivery, and that you run your own technology rather than using somebody else's VMS or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So we are a tech-enabled services company,
Very
is
cool.
a way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Most aren't. I mean, Ryan grew up in that space, and he could probably tell you a little bit more about it than I can. But in dealing with a lot of staffing, RPO, MSPs over the years, it's like it's cobbled together.
Yeah.
Or worse, years ago was proprietary. They built their own stuff and they're horrible at it because they're not tech companies. They're not. That wasn't their bit.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to learn about Magnet. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So, obviously, as you asked, we are a tech-enabled services company. So we have a layer of, being the managed services provider who can help you guide customers from totally an unmanaged stage of maturity, if you will, right? So customers sometimes when you're especially small and just starting, where your contingent workforce is not a big, population, you end up managing yourself, right? Through procurement, where you have services, SOWs that you open, get vendors into the door, and all of a sudden it grows into this, completely and unmanaged spend. And that's where, companies usually struggle and they look for companies like us that can help, help them through that journey of creating a program and then really leveraging the technology and the data and analytics that can help them sort of future proof what they need to drive, right? And the goal of how we do it as a tech enabled service is really threefold, right? So, one is really simplify the way we engage with the contingent program. As you can imagine, if it's unmanaged today, right, you as a client or a hiring manager or in procurement, you really have to do all the work, sort of, figuring out where the vendors are, where, think about the, freelancers, right, ecosystem that's growing up today. There's a lot of talent management platforms. So the heavy lifting of knowing what you want and, how it funnels to all the hiring managers within your organization is a pretty heavy task. So that's where Magnet can help. And one of the ways in which our technology helps is really with the system of engagement, right? If you look at traditional VMS, and Brian, looks like you know some of the VMSs,
Yeah.
including ourselves, right? I mean, this is a 30-year old company, Magnit, and all the vendors, right? The first VMS was launched in 1995, and Pro Unlimited, formerly that's Magnit now, so it was the first one to launch the VMS to the market, right? So when you think about the complexity in the workflows, the amount of manual process involved, and the handoff between services and technology, like you said before, it's not like a SaaS product, right? It's still sort of antiquated and sort of like the start and stops between where services comes in and where technology picks up. So it's very fragmented, very siloed. So a lot of what today's or the current landscape of VMSs have been very antiquated in that sense of thinking about automation, seamless integrations into the ecosystem, whether it's ERP system, HRIS system, right? There's tons of systems. So how do we really simplify that engagement so you as the user or the consumer of this program has easy access to, recruit, source, hire, onboard, right? Approve all of the processes on an everyday basis that people go through can be streamlined and simplified is a big part of what we are introducing with our technology. And the cool thing is really we've just in the last 6 weeks announced our new Gen AI assistant, just called Maggie, and Maggie can help you do all those things, everyday tasks, with the simple voice command, just like, I do my shopping with Alexa, right?
I hope it's better than Google because
I,
Google does not love me.
yeah, Gemini, is that what you're referring
Yeah,
to?
just simple like
Voice
talk
to
to
Yeah,
text
text.
and like basic stuff. It just doesn't
yeah.
understand me.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, I think that actually you hit on something very core to our philosophy, Ryan, which is, right, when you think about Maggie and the possibilities of Gen AI, right?
Hmm.
There are people who are excited, right? Obviously, nerds and tech geeks, like you, including
Hmm.
myself, possibilities are infinite. But then there are also people who are skeptical about data privacy, security, right? A lot of things that
Sure.
is going to be a pretty, uphill battle to deal with infosec and IT teams and all of that stuff. So I think there's the balance between skepticism and the excitement. But at the end of the day, we want this to be more practical, right, for consumers of what we are providing. And we kind of think about these in three types of use cases, right? So one is executing day-to-day tasks. So as an anecdote or one of the things that we work with customers and hiring managers is creating a requisition, right? So I just want to hire a software engineer in San Francisco, right? Let's just say that. And if you think about the process in today's world of the VMS, the combo of services and tech, it takes on an average of 5 to 7 days to just get through the process of opening a requisition, telling them what they're looking for, what the budget you need, and potentially telling your staffing companies, I need this. This is what I'm looking for, right? But with the concept of Gen AI and really the ability to, leverage our, system of record, as we call it, which is the data, which has these talent pools, right, that you can pull from. And it could be anywhere from, your own direct sourcing, your brand of internal pool that you have. You could have, staffing supplier provided talent pools, or you could be plugged into one of those freelance management systems, right? But the ability for our like Maggie to look at all of your talent pools and say, here's all the recommended, relevant candidates for what you're looking for, and immediately being able to, for you to be able to select a few and then pass it on to your supplier to say, go process these, right? Or set up the interview, right? So those are the kinds of things that could really take the 5 to 7 days to a matter of few hours or a day, right? At the max. Again, it'll vary by the adoption and the comfort level of every company and all of that. But the idea of simplifying that engagement and drastically having an impact on day-to-day use cases from requisition to sourcing or finding the right talent or even approving time cards, being able to do that with the voice command is where I think our approach is to focus on those things. So it drastically changes the lives of people that are, like really frustrated, right, in a lot of ways today.
Yeah. So, question, I know we're going to get deep into everything what y'all doing and
Yeah.
product and all, but you mentioned something that made me think about the time that I spent working in this area, 5 to 7 days just to open up the requisition, get it through, get it into the agencies.
Yeah.
It was that when I was then. That was 15 years ago. Like it hasn't
She
changed.
did say
Like,
antiquated.
yeah, I am kind of
But
antiquated.
that's
Yeah,
a surprise,
Twice.
right?
but I mean, it's really still that long.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And and one of the reasons, like, I'm here and, I've recruited a lot of new tech talent into the
Huh.
company is I come from tech, right? I
Yeah.
mean, my entire life has been in SaaS. And I think it's just the evolution, Ryan, to your point. The pace of technology innovation has just been not non-existent in a lot of ways, right?
I
A
concur.
lot of the vendors, right, including ourselves, were sort of working around the service construct,
Right.
right,
Yep.
as opposed to thinking about technology
Right.
front-ending a lot of things, right? So it's just the way shifting the way we think about how technology can be leveraged. And one of the things I tell users, because I was just on a 2-week trip to EMEA, like to visit some of our customers and talk about platform and Maggie and a bunch of other things, is it's, so for so long, all of us, right, users have spent time and budget and resources training people to use a system.
Right.
That's just that cannot be
That's
right.
right.
We are the users of the system. It has to be simple. So it's really shifting that to say it's time for the system to train to the user,
Right.
right? So it's
100%.
really kind of rethinking, reimagining the technology value in the equation of how the program is getting delivered to the customer.
Well, I
So
think there's two things there that I'd
yeah,
like to unpack. One is a lot of folks in the staffing, RPO, outsourced recruiting, we'll just say,
yeah,
they start in services, they're not tech. You mentioned that. The folks that even tried to build tech have failed, by and large. Not every case. It's because they're not technologists. They don't
yeah,
think like technologists, and they don't have the staff that are technologists. So we see a lot of failure of things that kind of get spun out or acquired and then spun out again. So that happens a lot. The second point is, I believe, Ryan, the reason that things haven't changed as much since you were in staffing and then at RPO at Conexa is the staffing buyer, the margins are so thin that they're not really innovators. I mean, they might say they're innovators, like at Staffing World or Staffing Industry Analysts or something like that, or CWS. They might say they're innovators. They're not innovators. They're laggards. And so I can see kind of the combination of those two things, them not being really tech savvy and also it just being really thin on the profit side. So they need a technology company. I'm gonna say your technology first, services second.
yeah,
You might not like that, but they need a technology company that actually understands that and understands them. They're not going to push the boundaries of innovation. That's not their bit. Their bit is trying to get the candidates a high quality candidate as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. That's their bit, and you're
yeah.
enabling that.
I
Hopefully,
would
you're
say,
enabling that.
yeah, I would say you're spot on because, that's another discovery for me, right? When I came into this industry 2.5 years ago, it's you're dealing with procurement. And Ryan, I think procurement, we know that has not changed,
No,
right? There's
no.
one
Oh,
goal, which is cost savings,
yes.
right, for
Hmm.
the company. And that's the right goal. I mean, you need
Yeah,
the, the checks
that's
and
their job.
balances for the
Yeah.
organization. But I think one of the things that I'm starting to see, which is very encouraging, is the fact that now, contingent workforce, again, the evolution needs to happen, is like more and more workers, baby boomers retiring, new people entering the workforce, and the younger generation wanting to really, think about work as the Uberization of work, right? So they just want to be gig workers. They just want to do some of this, right? They don't think about work the way, at least my generation, without going into specific generations, but at least what I used to think about, right, is it's my job. I do it full time, right? That's not how people are thinking about it. And with the growth of IC gig economy, right, broadly, I think the expectation to treat FTEs and contingent workers is also sort of raising the bar, which means, HR gets involved or talent acquisition gets involved. And I think that's when the actual notion of not thinking about contingent workforce as a cost savings effort, but really in the construct of talent and ensuring that, the talent represents, in a way talks to the brand of the company, right? So that's why you're starting to see direct sourcing sort of, taking some front place in organizations to say, let me do direct sourcing of the temp workers with my brand because so I think it's a healthy evolution that's happening, even though I don't know why it took so long, but it's happening
Hmm.
at the right time. And I think,
Well, I can tell you that there's two things that we see. One
yeah,
is practitioners, both HR and TA, have to care more about candidate experience
yeah,
because of the transparency, the era of transparency that we live in. So they're kind of being forced at gunpoint to care more about that. And secondly, candidate behavior has changed
yeah,
drastically, especially when everyone's carrying around this. They apply to a job. It's
instant,
like texting someone, right?
yeah,
When you're on
Hmm.
WhatsApp and you text someone, you expect them to text you back. That's how they view companies and jobs. And
yeah,
so I say buyer behavior, their behavior has changed, which is forcing change everywhere else. I don't think that HR or TA wanted this change or wants this thing. I think they're dragging and kicking. They're going to be pulled into this. But if they don't respond to candidates in seconds and minutes, those candidates are gone.
yeah.
So Ryan, I think I interrupted you with a question. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
no. So I'm really curious here, and this maybe is a little off topic, a little off product here. But I'm really curious about the evolution. Right? So we've talked about a little bit about the evolution of VMS and you all through 30 years, right? You've been around for 30
Yeah, 30
years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does this change, which I know is happening now, but where does this become mainstream in the industry and expected on the part of the enterprise? Where is this just okay? We're no longer dealing with the antiquated software. It has to be this, and we're moving forward.
Yeah, I think I think we are at the cusp of it. I can't, I can't tell you the adoption, but we have about 600 plus global customers today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I would say, I've spoken and gotten feedback from majority of our customers and, at least 10 plus in Europe just last 2 weeks. I think, people, when they see this new wave of how to leverage technology, I think that it's just the sparks, right?
Yeah.
They're like, well, all of a sudden, think about this, right? Very simple. One of the favorites, consistent things that I heard last 2 weeks was, I just want to get answers to my question, right?
Hmm.
About how many contractors do I have?
Mm-hmm.
What
Right.
is my forecasted spend? What's the budget, right? It's just what are the top skills I'm hiring?
Yeah.
It's just basic questions. And today, regardless of which technology you use, you are dependent on your MSP. in
Right.
some way or
Mhm.
form to
Right.
get the answers, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
imagine like if I'm on I'm in a QBR in somewhere with my boss
Mhm.
or with the board or whatever, and I need answers or if something pops up, if I need instantaneous
Yeah.
answer, right? The
Yeah.
power of data at my fingertips to be able to effectively communicate and be dynamic about how that gets
Mhm.
addressed.
And
I
Vidya,
think
that's
that's
what
the biggest piece.
is that Maggie? Is
Yes,
that
that's Maggie. Yeah.
Yeah.
so? What I love about that, and Ryan and I have seen this in a couple plays just recently,
Mm-hmm.
is the idea of going to a tab inside software and then finding a place in analytics and then typing in some type of report or whatever this bit
Menus
like
within menus.
menus within menus within menus of that's a kind of a boomer way of thinking about analytics.
Yeah.
And I love the way that you're thinking of it. Like I can ask Maggie, how
Yeah.
many, like you said, how many contractors do we have currently? Boom, there's an answer. And I think that's actually really exciting for people that need analytics, but can't go or don't want to go through that old process to find to find an answer that's already been out that's already outdated.
Yeah, I mean it's and another challenge that Ryan coming back to, right? When is that going to
Mhm.
change? I think as people see the possibility that I don't have to sit in front of a computer
Yeah,
and need to
Right.
use the system, I can use the system via voice.
Mhm.
Uh, I think changes the way of how people think about technology, right? If I mean Alexa, right? I mean I
yep,
toothpaste. I order
Yeah.
toothpaste because I forget. That's the last thing I remember
Mhm.
to order, right? It happens all the time. But I don't have to plan for it. I can
right.
just sit and ask and it's going to happen or give me the
Right.
answers. I think that's what changes, at least in the conversations I'm having. And I think the more our customers adopt, and I think we build the testimonials, right, is going to be a big way in which other vendors are going to see. I mean, they saw a glimpse of what we're launching. We've launched at CWS, as you probably know, the
Oh
Mhm.
yeah,
staffing SIA's premier event in Dallas. So that's when we launched it. But I think it's going to be the next 5 years, I would say, at least for people to shift, HR to come to the table, and it becomes a talent conversation for the organization, right? It's almost like the intersection of all of these and the timing of all of these, Ryan,
Right.
that will really help drive, you know, almost like turning the page on this fragmented industry with intermediaries all around,
Right.
right?
Right. So, Wim, so earlier today we were talking about this, going through the menus to grab your reports and all that, and you keep saying it's very boomer. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember the name of the generation, the silent generation. This is like beyond boomer. This is like way back. Like
oh
this
nice.
is more than antiquated, right? Like this is. I mean,
It's
we
like
don't.
trying to drive people to a website. It's just dumb.
Yeah, we don't.
Like no more of that.
And you mentioned Alexa. So the majority of our listens, by a good significant amount, come from
Alexa,
Alexa.
Yeah.
Like
it's insane.
specifically Alexa, like just asking, people asking questions about work,
Yeah.
and up comes the shows. It's we were not aware of that
No,
until we
no,
started
we
looking.
a question. I did some work 100 years ago for Field Glass and Beeline and IQ
Yeah.
Navigator. So one of the things, the challenges back then, I mean, it was antiquated back then, but one of the issues that they all had is they had different delivery models, different costing models. Some would give the platform away for free and then take a percentage of the transactions that went through of it. I don't remember, and this is the odd, so I don't remember anyone actually making a pure SaaS play back then. They had these like weird financial models that once
Yeah.
you dug into them, which was crazy confusing for the buyer. Like, okay, now how does this work? etc. I'm assuming y'all have cleaned that whole thing has been cleaned up since then.
I wouldn't. I mean, just like Ryan,
I wouldn't assume.
I wouldn't assume that.
Damn it!
It's part of my headwind, right? Yeah. So I think there are. I mean, other than the names
Right.
that you mentioned, I
Mhm.
mean, there
Yeah.
have been recent small mid-market players that have come in that are starting to, kind of test out the subscription model again, because these are tech-only vendors, and it makes sense for them, right? And that's all they do, and they just want to be a turnkey solution. So it makes perfect sense. In fact, one of as part of the platform, we also support the ability for organizations to do white collar and blue collar. So we call it blended collar. So this is
cool.
where you have organizations who are manufacturing or logistics, right? Providers, where you have warehouse workers, right, or truck drivers or hospice care workers, right? So these are all shifts, or blue collar workers. And so we acquired a company called GRI, which kind of brought in that side of the technology that we have integrated. So if you're a customer, and we have a couple of customers who have the need for white collar and blue collar, so we kind of have an integrated dashboard. But my point being, I think the part of what we want to get to is the ability for users to effectively consume technology, right? Where if they're saying, I don't want services, then we have the ability to give them a delivery model that they can just consume tech because they can manage what they want, right? Or there's a different vendor that can manage the technology, and we are out of the business. We just license tech. But I think the supplier sourced model is the common model that still seems to prevail at this point. But we are starting to. It's definitely one of the areas that we are working with the analysts in the industry to, really help us kind of move in that direction. And I think 25 would be where we will be rolling out that option and really working with some, to push that model. But, again, this is another one which is a really heavy push because of the way the industry has been.
It's probably quite a shock for you coming from SaaS into this going, what in the hell is going on?
So in the kind of, okay, it's a good segue into two questions I have. One is, I want to get into the buying questions. We always like to go down buying questions and what people need to really truly understand because for whatever reason they may not have a solution right like this. But before we do that, since you mentioned coming in from SaaS, how crazy does it feel to you? Because we love when people come into HR tech, the first couple of years. How crazy is it to you for the job that you need to do, and how different is it? Is it really that different? Like your messaging, your positioning, how you're talking to customers?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I think it's a change management internally and externally.
Right.
Right. Because when you have companies that have evolved from being a services company and then wrapped, sort of these scripts and tools around it, it's not tech, right? Let's just be honest.
Right.
Okay. It's just, I don't know, a Band-Aid solution that has been, created.
Frankenstein.
But I think so it is a very heavy lift, organizational effort, because it's not just me that's the spokesperson for the company. So it's about enablement, it's about training. And, fortunately for me, I own marketing as well. So it's really sort of turning on the product marketing engine to really work on the messaging, positioning, and then even, ensuring that we have the right buyers at the table, right? Like when we have, talking about Maggi, right? Procurement alone is not going to make the cut, right?
No.
We love procurement, but, we need...
It ends up in procurement.
That's right.
When they cut the check, you like procurement.
Yes.
Well, they'll haggle with price, but really you're selling to the CHRO, the global head of talent acquisition, maybe even the CFO, and you're selling to them
and
once
the
they
IT.
get it.
You want IT at the table because,
good point.
At the end of the day, this is another piece of technology that goes into the landscape of what they use, what they integrate with, the infosec, security, all the things. So I think it's like training at that level, right? At the buyer level, at the messaging level, and then also equipping our, in addition to sales, our services team to know how they engage, because day to day on a, whoever is the CSC at the client side, being able to effectively communicate the same language, right? To be honest, I don't even know why it's called a VMS.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
why is it nobody's able to answer the question? To
Yeah.
me,
No
it's
one.
a platform that enables a holistic, comprehensive view of how talent can be provided, like the right match of talent to opportunity, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
another lever for companies to think about overall talent strategy. That's how I think about it.
That's
Mhm.
how I think about it. Just in time, what we learned in manufacturing years
Yeah.
ago, just in time manufacturing, it's just in time
Right.
talent.
Yeah.
So it's looking at it. I've never understood why they call it BMS.
Yeah.
And
No.
I've studied it for 20 something years. I've
Well, it's like,
still
why do they call it an
inter-
applicant tracking system? We just
same
talked
thing.
about this today. Same
Yeah.
thing. It's
Well,
just
it's a 60-year-old category that
exactly.
hasn't hasn't changed. It has changed actually. But it's who owns CS? So you own product and and marketing. Who is
So
CS?
there's a peer of mine who owns the customer service or client
Yeah.
service and delivery
Okay.
function. Yeah.
But y'all are always talking because
Oh
they're
yeah, you're like connected to the hip because
right.
because there's when we have, I mean, one other good thought, sign for evolution, Ryan, back to
Hmm.
your initial question was we are starting to see, the need for product QBRs and service QBRs.
Right.
So people are slowly starting to see, okay, technology is more important. Also, it's not just one, where product or technology gets like 10 minutes, on a conversation. It doesn't do justice, right? Because you don't get
Right.
Hmm.
enough time to say, how do I get value out of this thing, right? Because in some way, shape, or form, the customer is paying for it, even though it's called supplier sourced.
Right.
Right.
They are paying for it. So let's
Yeah.
be, honest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's some good signs for sure.
Yeah. So, a question about Maggie. So Maggie she gets into everything, right? Reporting, etc. Right? Does Maggie at some point get to a spot where maybe the QBR almost can go away, where it's interacting with the client, allowing them to truly see everything that they just wouldn't be able to put together, or even your people may not be able to put together from a human, thought process. And Maggie kind of marries that together and then helps both organizations scale up a little more and get better.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the possibilities of, you know, being able to plan, leveraging Maggie for
Hmm.
people to plan or expand programs in new countries, would be fantastic, right? And it kind of, to me, I think about those futuristic use cases where,
Right.
Maggie's able to do all of that without actually having to have virtual or in-person conversations. It's a Maggie to program team to the client's conversation all happening like
Hmm.
together, right? So I think it's possible, but it's also going to depend on adoption and then, the training of Maggie, right?
Right.
Because as we all know, AI requires, more training. So the more
Hmm.
Maggie gets to know you or me or the client, I
Yeah.
think
Right.
that's going to help drive better opportunities to increase sort of the level of engagement of Maggie within the
Hmm.
organization and the program.
Yeah, I know that was probably an unfair futuristic question,
Yeah. Yeah. Flying
Anything is
cars.
but
possible with technology.
It's all possible.
yeah, when I start digging, I'm like, well, it could do this, and
Yeah.
what about this?
Just because it can, should it?
Well, yeah.
Uh, Tell us a little bit about your perfect customer, because you've talked about global. Ryan and I like to get into the like, are you industry? Is there certain industries that you love, etc. Size of company, etc. Just kind of walk the audience through what makes a good prospect for you.
Yeah, I mean, majority of our customers are Fortune 500 companies, so pretty enterprise size. But as I mentioned, our recent, our acquisition. In that process, we have, inherited businesses and companies or logos across Europe, including UK Ireland. We have some new business we acquired in Netherlands, right? So there's a combo of mid markets also in that mix. But I think industry wise, we are very heavy with tech companies. So some of the big names are our companies, and we help them with their programs. And then finance, insurance, automotive, We have a pretty big chunk of our business that's focused on healthcare as well in the U.S. And we have a separate name for it. It's called Right Sourcing by Magnit, if people don't know, but it's sort of like a separate brand because of the nature of how we evolved. And that's a very well-known brand in the healthcare market, so we kind of kept it, but but it's Magnet's brand. So we kind of go across and, with the GRI, we call it the shift solution, right? For blue collar workers and shifts capabilities. We do have a lot of logistics, warehousing, manufacturing customers that we work with. So it's a pretty wide spectrum of industries that we support.
That's fantastic. So the audience is always interested in like the connectivity of the technology. So what is it? What does it need to be? What does Magnet need to be connected to, or what do you find in your clients? Where does it touch? What else does it touch?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually, standard systems like a ERP,
Yeah.
right? HRIS are probably the big ones. There's other one-offs, tools that companies have at times that, like for instance, a lot of our customers now ask for APIs to consume reporting or analytics information because within their organization, they want to have a comprehensive, report so they pull data to integrate into their whatever reporting tool of choice, right? Tableau, Power, whatever you can think of any. So there's one-off aspects of that. A lot of customers use ServiceNow, for instance. So that's something to integrate into their workflows, depending on how they're consuming the contingent approval onboarding process. So those are probably the big items. But yeah, it always includes integration of, transactional data, operational data, whether it's invoicing, time cards, all of that stuff, and worker data, obviously, that goes in. That's a synchronous communication or asynchronous, depending on how the feeds or APIs interact.
So final question on my side is, I mentioned it previously, buying questions. What would you want to hear a prospect ask you? What is the questions they need to, two or three?
It.
Yeah,
if you could script the
what would
3
they
or
ask
4
you?
or whatever one question, what would you love to hear
Or
from them?
maybe we change it up this time. Maybe what are the 3 or 4 questions that if they asked you, you know that they're serious?
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I have 3
or
or 4,
enlightened.
but I will drop in a couple that I think are.
We can keep changing the
Oh
questions.
yeah. Oh yeah.
You want to change the questions on me too.
Oh yeah.
So I think one of the intriguing ways for me to have a very healthy conversation and sort of bring them into the fold has been around when HR is involved and it's a talent conversation, right? So to me, really having customers talk about, how can you help me, get the right talent? How can you help my brand, leverage my brand, right? That's when you know that they are interested in a broader talent conversation. They're going to have the right people at the table, and we can really help them put the puzzle pieces together, right? And bring our partners into the picture if, we have partners in some cases. So I think that's a very good conversation because then we can actually have a healthy conversation about what they have, baseline it, and then really help them how Magnet can help you further accelerate it or fix it or whatever the situation may be. The second part is really around, I think the second most, aspect of it is, when they talk about technology. I think that's when you know that they know to leverage and, be optimized about what they want to deliver for the organization. And, there have been instances where it is like they come to us only for tech. So tech only conversations, right?
Right.
So those are very good conversations because then they know that it's a focused conversation. They're in it for the technology. They know they can get data. They can get, all the coolness of what they've seen. and they really want to optimize their existing program with technology. So I think those are probably the most big ones. And there's like the third one I would add is we do have a pretty significant data ocean. So, which we, it's a system of record sits on top of. So we do have, pay and talent intelligence, location intelligence, which is sort of an a la carte service that's available. So people, or a lot of suppliers come to us around that, but it's not the biggest conversation. The former two are probably the big ones that can really be a very healthy and forward-moving conversation for us.
So one more question. I lied. And then Wim, I'll let you take it from there. Because I don't think we've talked about this, do any prospects ever come to you in that conversation and focus on candidate experience at all? Or is it solely on the company side and streamlining and making their process better?
I don't think they lead with that. For sure. Because I think if it is probably there somewhere, it gets get to that place through how we talk about candidate experience and hiring manager experience and supplier experience. So that's part of how we deliver the message. But it has not been the leading point of the conversation. D&I has been, something that people do bring up.
They're looking for different talent pools. And again, if they're thinking of it as a talent portfolio, like a financial portfolio, then they're thinking about talent in different ways. And if you're trying to slice and dice that and get specific talent, I could see that. I could see the conversations getting there pretty quickly. Real quick, the two things really, as for me finally, is you're displacing something, especially at the enterprise. They have something, whether or not it's proprietary or Post-it notes or Excel or another solution. What's that like in terms of the questions that they ask and also the things that are that you're gonna face if they're ripping something else out and they're putting you in, they're getting a better solution. Check, got it. But we all know adoption is horrible.
Yeah.
So like, how do we get them to use a better technology? Is a question. So really, it's a displacement question. It's how do you deal with displacement?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And one of the names you mentioned, I'm not gonna mention names, but we all know, right? Some of these ERP companies have been around for a long time, and they get through their way, right? It's like, I bought this, so I'm gonna get this too, right? So you kind of go into these organizations, and some of them have these tools like 20, 30 years, and they've customized. It's fascinating for me. They've customized every single button on this form, right? I'm like, how much time are you spending thinking about this and thinking about localization of all this stuff?
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a lot of investment.
It's custom software by now. At that point, it's unrecognizable to like what they normally sell.
I think part of that's also a false perception of accomplishment when a company overcompensates for customization to that level.
Adding process.
I almost feel
buttons.
like it's, hey, we know we're deficient in some area. Let's do this, and look how beautiful it is. And I
was telling somebody the other day, my cousin runs for one of the large ERP. He runs the aerospace division, and one of the larger aerospace companies, they pay almost $80 million a year in just change orders. And he's told me, he's like, it's custom software, like what we normally have and what they have. The two aren't even alike. They're not even close to one another. And so I could see people that being a change issue if they've got the buttons colored the right way and things like that.
But from a displacement standpoint, that's the conversation that's the hardest, right?
Yeah.
Is when you have that much, penetration, and people sometimes forget, the software maybe didn't sound as expensive, but the amount of customizations and SOWs you've opened to get this done, it could be, right, 7, 8 figure number, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think back to what I said earlier, that's the conversation I have. The conversation, the statement is, you shouldn't have to customize a system to this
Right.
extent. The
Right.
system needs to train to you, right? So I think that is the real trigger to make people think, and certainly people want to, but I think it's that the adoption within the organization, or even the process that people get sort of accustomed to for 30 years. I mean, think about some of these, right? I mean, people are not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
change, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just getting the decision makers on board. I think sometimes when you have all of these disparate organizations and people coming in, if people worry about change management and adoption of such a big decision on how it's going to impact their people, right? And what is it going to disrupt?
Right.
And what is it going to cost the business? So I think those are probably the hardest and conversations that I've had
Yeah.
to say, make the leap.
Yeah.
We
They
are
see the
you're actually a
beauty.
better choice.
They see eloquence. They see that this is a better application, better use of their time, better use of capital. And then all of a sudden now they've got to recognize, but everyone knows how to use this other system. How the hell are we going to get them to use it?
Yeah.
Which last question for me is, how do you do your implementations? How do you stand it up? Do you have consulting firms that help you with that, or do you all
We
do it
have an
yourself?
internal implementations team that,
Yeah,
we go through a whole project management approach, right?
yeah, yeah.
To kick off the discovery to, providing a best practice solution. So it's, because we have customers across a wide variety of industries, so we can at
Right,
least lead with best practices and then try to minimize the number of customizations because
right.
nobody wants to
No, no.
Yeah.
support one-off from a product perspective,
Oh
nor
yeah,
think about, okay, anytime something new happens, all of a sudden you don't get it because you've customized it and it's not relevant to you anymore. So there's, so it's having those conversations with the customer. But yeah, that's so we do have a team that does that.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been absolutely wonderful, and thank you for your time.